What if the woman your husband abandoned at her father's funeral was secretly the daughter of a billionaire? What if the modest janitor who raised her in a small Atlanta apartment had hidden a $5.2 billion empire to teach her humility? And what if every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every moment of betrayal was being recorded by fate itself, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back? This is Elmerum Stories, where African folktales meet real-life lessons that will change how you see the world. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, let's begin. The November rain fell soft and steady over Oakland Cemetery in Atlanta, drumming against black umbrellas and turning the red Georgia clay dark as blood. Aisha Monroe stood at the edge of her father's grave, her fingers trembling around a single white rose. William Sterling, though everyone in their neighborhood knew him only as Willie the janitor, had been lowered into the earth an hour ago. The funeral had been small, quiet, just like the man himself. Her father had worked the night shift at Grady Memorial Hospital for 32 years. He wore the same blue maintenance uniform, carried the same dented lunch pail, and never complained. Not once. He had raised Aisha alone after her mother died when she was 3, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in the old 4th Ward. They ate dinner together every night at their small kitchen table. He taught her to read using library books. He walked her to school every morning until she turned 12, holding her hand at crosswalks even when she protested she was too old. He never spoke about money, never mentioned family wealth or legacy. He spoke instead about character, about treating people with dignity, about the difference between what glitters and what truly shines. Now he was gone. Aisha felt the weight of the silence pressing into her chest. She was 29 years old, and the only parent she had ever known was beneath 6 feet of cold earth. The rose slipped from her fingers and landed softly on the casket below. Behind her, she heard footsteps on wet grass. She didn't turn. She knew the sound of her husband's expensive Italian shoes, even in rain. "Aisha," Derek Monroe said. His voice carried no warmth, no grief, just impatience. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and slowly turned to face him. Derek stood 3 feet away, his charcoal suit perfectly tailored, his expression unreadable beneath the umbrella he held only over himself. Rain beaded on Aisha's black dress. He didn't move to cover her. "Can this wait?" she asked quietly, her voice hoarse from crying. "No," Derek said. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. "It can't." Aisha stared at the envelope. Something cold began to spread through her stomach, something that had nothing to do with the November chill. "What is that?" "Divorce papers," Derek said flatly. He extended the envelope toward her. When she didn't take it, he let it drop onto the wet grass between them. "I'm done, Aisha. I've been done for a while now. I just didn't want to do this before your father passed. But now that he's gone, there's no reason to keep pretending." The words hit her like physical blows. She took a step backward, her heels sinking slightly into the soft earth. "Derek, my father just died. Yesterday. We buried him today." "I know," he said, with the tone of a man discussing traffic. "And I'm sorry about that. But my life doesn't stop because yours fell apart. I've met someone. Her name is Kendra. She's an executive at a marketing firm downtown. We've been seeing each other for 8 months. 8 months. Aisha's mind reeled backward, counting. 8 months ago, her father had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 8 months ago, she had been splitting her time between their apartment and the hospital, holding her father's hand through chemotherapy, watching him waste away in a sterile room that smelled of disinfectant and approaching death. 8 months ago, while she was watching the only family she had slip away, her husband had been building a new life with another woman. "You've been cheating on me since my father got sick?" The question came out as barely more than a whisper. Derek shrugged, an elegant roll of his shoulders beneath expensive fabric. "I wouldn't call it cheating. I call it moving on. You were never really present anyway, Aisha. Always at that hospital. Always crying. Always broke. Your father was a janitor, for God's sake. And you work part-time at a nonprofit that barely pays you. I married you thinking you'd grow into something more. But you're still the same small-minded girl from the old 4th Ward, clinging to a dead man's memory and a life that's going nowhere." The cruelty in his voice was almost casual, as if he were critiquing a bad meal at a restaurant. Aisha felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart, that had already been shattered by grief. This was something deeper. Something foundational. "I loved you," she said. "I know," Derek replied. "That's what made it so easy." He turned to leave, his umbrella tilting slightly as he navigated between headstones. Then he paused and glanced back over his shoulder. "Sign the papers within 30 days. My lawyer will be in touch." "And Aisha?" He offered a thin, pitying smile. "Don't fight this. You can't afford to." Then he was gone, his silhouette disappearing into the rain and mist. Aisha stood alone at her father's grave. The envelope lay in the grass at her feet, slowly soaking through. She bent down, picked it up with numb fingers, and held it against her chest. The rain continued to fall. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed. An engine started. Tires hissed on wet pavement. She sank to her knees in the mud, her black dress pooling around her, and let the grief consume her completely. The sobs came in waves, for her father, for her marriage, for the life she thought she had built. The rain washed over her, cold and relentless, and she wondered if this was what drowning felt like. She had no idea that in 48 hours, everything she believed about her father, her life, and her future would be shattered and rebuilt in ways she could never imagine. She had no idea that the man in the grave before her had been protecting her from this exact moment since the day she was born. And she had no idea that Derek Monroe had just made the most expensive mistake of his life. 2 days after the funeral, Aisha sat in her apartment staring at a letter that had arrived by courier that morning. The envelope was heavy, cream-colored, with an embossed logo she didn't recognize, Whitmore and Associates, private legal counsel. The letter inside requested her presence at their offices in Buckhead at 2 p.m. that afternoon. It was signed by a senior partner named Harrison Whitmore III. The letter mentioned her father by name. It mentioned an estate matter requiring immediate attention. It provided no other details. Aisha held the letter in her hands, reading it for the 5th time. Her father had owned nothing. A 30-year-old Honda Civic. Furniture from thrift stores. Clothes that smelled of industrial cleaner. What estate could there possibly be? She looked around her apartment. Derek had already come by yesterday with 2 friends and a U-Haul, taking everything he claimed was his. The leather sofa. The flat-screen television. The expensive coffee maker. He had moved through their home like a businessman liquidating assets, efficient and cold. He hadn't looked at her once. Kendra had waited in the truck outside, her silhouette visible through the windshield, scrolling through her phone. Now the apartment felt hollow. Empty spaces where furniture had been. Lighter rectangles on the walls where pictures had hung. The divorce papers sat on the kitchen counter, still unsigned. Derek's lawyer had called twice already. 30 days, the voice had reminded her. Don't make this difficult. At 1:30 p.m., Aisha changed into the only professional outfit she owned, a simple black dress and modest heels, and took the bus to Buckhead. She couldn't afford an Uber. Her nonprofit job paid $32,000 a year. Her savings account held $847. She had no idea how she would afford a divorce lawyer. The Whitmore and Associates building rose 40 stories into the Atlanta skyline, all glass and steel and old Southern money. The lobby floor was Italian marble. A receptionist in a tailored suit greeted her by name before she could introduce herself, as if she were expected, as if she mattered. "Mr. Whitmore is ready for you, Mrs. Monroe. 40th floor, suite 4001. The elevator was quiet as a prayer. Aisha watched the numbers climb, her reflection staring back at her from the polished doors. She looked tired, hollowed out, like someone who had cried until there was nothing left. The 40th floor opened into a reception area that looked like it belonged in a museum. Darkwood paneling, oil paintings of stern men in suits from centuries past. A chandelier that probably cost more than Aisha had earned in her entire life. A woman in her 60s, elegant and composed, rose from behind a mahogany desk. "Ms. Monroe," she said warmly. Not Mrs. The distinction felt intentional. "Mr. Whitmore is expecting you. Please, follow me." They walked down a long corridor lined with closed doors bearing the names of partners. At the end of the hall, double doors opened into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Behind a massive desk sat a man in his 70s, white-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a suit that whispered wealth. "Ms. Monroe," Harrison Whitmore said, rising. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." Aisha sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She folded her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. "I'll be direct," Whitmore said, settling back into his chair. "Your father was my client for 34 years. I'm the executor of his estate. What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to process, but I need you to listen carefully." He opened a folder on his desk. Inside were documents, photographs, and what looked like financial statements. Your father's legal name was William Sterling IV. He was the sole heir to the Sterling Consolidated Holdings, a privately held conglomerate with assets valued at approximately $5.2 billion. The words hung in the air like smoke. Aisha stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your father was a billionaire, Ms. Monroe. One of the wealthiest men in the Southeast. And as of his death, you are his only heir." The room tilted slightly. Aisha gripped the armrests of her chair. "That's impossible. My father was a janitor. He worked at Grady Memorial. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. We shopped at Goodwill. He drove a car older than I am. All by choice," Whitmore said gently. "Your father inherited his fortune when he was 23, after his own father passed. He found the wealth suffocating. The expectations, the social circles, the way money changed how people treated him. So he walked away from it. He placed everything in trust, appointed me as trustee, and lived the life he wanted. A simple life. An honest life. He worked as a janitor because he believed in dignity of labor. He raised you in that apartment because he wanted you to understand the value of things, not their price." Whitmore slid a photograph across the desk. It showed a young man in an expensive suit standing in front of a mansion, looking miserable. Aisha recognized her father's eyes, but nothing else. The man in the photo looked trapped. "He never told you because he wanted you to become someone on your own terms. Not because of money. Not because of a name. He wanted you to develop character, compassion, resilience. And according to every report I received over the years, he succeeded." "Reports?" Aisha whispered. "Your father was never as absent as you might have thought. He knew everything about your life, including your marriage." Whitmore pulled out another document. "6 months ago, your father came to this office. He was very ill by then, but his mind was sharp. He told me he suspected your husband was unfaithful. He suspected Derek had married you hoping for an inheritance he could control. So your father took steps." He slid a legal document across the desk. Aisha's eyes scanned the dense legal language, struggling to comprehend. "Everything is in an irrevocable trust with you as the sole beneficiary. The structure is ironclad. Your husband has no legal claim to any of it. Not $1. Your father made absolutely certain of that. Even if you had remained married, Derek would never have accessed these funds." Tears began to stream down Aisha's face, but she didn't sob. She just stared at the documents, at the numbers with so many zeros they stopped making sense. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew Derek would leave me. He suspected. And he protected you." The next 6 months passed like a dream Aisha kept expecting to wake from. Harrison Whitmore guided her through every step with patient precision, explaining trusts and holdings and portfolios until the language of wealth became almost familiar. She learned that her father had owned commercial real estate across 3 states, held significant shares in technology companies, and had investments that generated millions in passive income annually. She learned that the man who had packed peanut butter sandwiches in a dented lunch pail had been quietly funding scholarships, women's shelters, and medical research for decades through anonymous donations. She learned that he had known her better than she had known herself. Aisha moved slowly, deliberately. She didn't quit her nonprofit job immediately. She didn't move out of her apartment. She signed the divorce papers without contest and let Derek believe he had won. His lawyer seemed almost disappointed by how easy she made it. The settlement gave Derek nothing because, on paper, there was nothing to give. They had been married only 3 years. No children. No shared property of significant value. Aisha kept the apartment lease. Derek took his furniture and his freedom. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in March. By Wednesday, Derek had moved into a luxury condo in Midtown with Kendra. Social media told Aisha everything she no longer wanted to know. Pictures of them at expensive restaurants. Weekend trips to Miami. Kendra's hand displaying a diamond ring that caught the light in every photo. They looked happy, triumphant, like people who had escaped something unfortunate and were now living their best lives. Aisha deleted her social media accounts and got to work. She began quietly. The Sterling Monroe Initiative was founded through a network of lawyers and advisors, structured as a private foundation dedicated to helping abandoned spouses, women rebuilding after divorce, families in crisis, and single parents navigating poverty. The foundation purchased a historic building in downtown Atlanta and renovated it into a resource center. Aisha hired counselors, lawyers, financial advisors, and career coaches. She created emergency funds for women fleeing dangerous situations. She established job training programs and childcare services. She poured her pain into purpose and watched it transform into something beautiful. The foundation's work was quiet but effective. Word spread through churches and community centers. Women arrived broken and left standing. Families on the edge of collapse found stability. The foundation asked for nothing in return except that those who were helped would one day help others. Aisha herself remained anonymous. The foundation's public face was a board of directors and a professional staff. Donations came from the Sterling Consolidated Holdings through carefully structured channels that revealed nothing about their source. Aisha attended board meetings, but sat in the back. She visited the center often, but introduced herself only as a volunteer. She was healing, slowly, learning to separate the woman Derek had diminished from the woman her father had raised her to be. By September, the Sterling Monroe Initiative had helped over 300 families. Local news had run several stories about the mysterious foundation doing transformative work in Atlanta. City officials praised its impact. Other nonprofits sought partnerships, and Aisha decided it was time. The annual Sterling Monroe Gala was announced in October. A black-tie fundraiser at the Four Seasons Hotel in downtown Atlanta, with ticket prices starting at $5,000. Proceeds would expand the foundation's services across Georgia. The guest list included city council members, business leaders, philanthropists, and media. It would be the foundation's first major public event. Aisha personally ensured that 2 specific invitations were delivered by courier to a luxury condo in Midtown. Mr. Derek Monroe and Ms. Kendra Blake. The invitations were elegant, embossed, impossible to ignore. They included a handwritten note explaining that Mr. Monroe had been selected because of his business acumen and Ms. Blake because of her marketing expertise. The foundation hoped they would attend and consider joining its advisory board. The flattery was intentional. Derek and Kendra couldn't resist. The night of the gala, the Four Seasons ballroom glowed with golden light and quiet wealth. Crystal chandeliers. Tables dressed in silk. A string quartet playing softly in the corner. 300 guests in tuxedos and evening gowns mingled over champagne and exchanged business cards. Derek and Kendra arrived fashionably late, dressed to impress, scanning the room for important people to meet. Aisha watched them from backstage, her heart steady, her hands calm. She wore a floor-length emerald gown that had been tailored perfectly to her frame. Her hair was styled in elegant twists. Diamond earrings her father had left her. She had found them in a safety deposit box, caught the light. She looked like someone who had always belonged in rooms like this. At 8 o'clock, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The foundation's public director stepped to the microphone and welcomed the guests, thanking them for their generosity and commitment to the mission. Then she smiled. And now, I'd like to introduce the woman who made all of this possible. The founder and primary benefactor of the Sterling Monroe Initiative. Please welcome Ms. Aisha Monroe. The applause was polite, expectant. Aisha walked onto the stage, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She reached the microphone and looked out over the crowd. It took her exactly 3 seconds to find Derek's face. She watched the recognition hit him like a freight train. His expression went from confusion to shock to something close to horror. Beside him, Kendra's mouth fell open, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. "Good evening," Aisha said, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Aisha Monroe, daughter of William Sterling IV, sole heir to Sterling Consolidated Holdings. Some of you may not know that name. My father preferred it that way. He spent his life working as a janitor at Grady Memorial Hospital because he believed in the dignity of honest work and the importance of humility." She paused, letting her words settle over the room. In the crowd, she saw reporters leaning forward, their phones out, recording. "My father passed away last November. One day after his funeral, my husband served me with divorce papers. He told me I was going nowhere, that I came from nothing, that I would always be nothing. The room had gone completely silent. Every eye was on her. He was wrong. I came from a man who chose love over luxury, character over comfort, and integrity over inheritance. He raised me to understand that wealth means nothing if you have no one worthy to share it with. And he protected me, even after death, from people who saw me only as something to use. Aisha's eyes locked onto Derek's. He had gone pale. Beside him, Kendra was staring at him with an expression that could have frozen fire. This foundation exists because my father taught me that our greatest responsibility is to lift others, to help those who are hurting, to be the answer to someone's prayer. Every person we help, every family we restore, every life we rebuild. That is his legacy. That is what real wealth looks like. The applause began slowly, then built into a wave of sound that filled the ballroom. People rose to their feet. Cameras flashed. Aisha smiled, gracious and composed, and thanked them. She didn't look at Derek again. She didn't need to. Later, security would report that Kendra Blake had thrown her champagne in Derek Monroe's face in the hotel lobby, screaming that he had cost her billions. That she had called him every name security had ever heard, and several they hadn't. That she had walked out of the hotel alone, leaving him standing in a puddle of expensive champagne and shattered dreams. Derek would try to contact Aisha 17 times over the next month. Calls, emails, messages through mutual acquaintances. All went unanswered. He would eventually learn that his name had been placed on a permanent banned list at the Sterling Monroe Initiative. His presence was neither wanted nor welcome. Aisha never responded. She had nothing left to say to him. She was too busy building something beautiful from the ashes of everything she had lost. True wealth is not counted in bank accounts, but in the character we build and the lives we touch. Aisha's father understood what so many forget, that humility teaches what privilege never can, that love protects what greed destroys, and that the greatest inheritance is not money but values. Derek chased what glittered and lost what truly shined. He saw poverty where there was purpose, weakness where there was strength, and worthlessness where there was a fortune beyond measure. In the end, Aisha discovered that her father's greatest gift was not the billions he left behind, but the woman he raised her to become. She learned that living well is not about revenge, but about rising. Not about what was taken, but what cannot be stolen. Dignity, purpose, and a heart that chooses to heal by helping others heal. Like, subscribe, share, and comment the lesson you learned.